If you build it, they will come. That might work for baseball fields and Kevin Costner, but it's a recipe for disaster if you take that approach with your design systems. Now, what happens if you build it and nobody comes? Today, we're going to break down why designing the components and the topography and the variables and all that stuff is actually the easy part, relatively speaking. And we'll learn what you can do to get your team excited about using your design system. So if you've ever struggled with design system adoption, this conversation is for you. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome. I am super stoked to have you. Have you picked up your paperback copy of Beyond UX Design, Master Your Craft, Beyond Pixels and Prototypes? Unlock the secrets of UX success and learn all the things they didn't teach you in school. Get free shipping on all orders over $30 and use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your entire order. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book to learn more. This week's episode is brought to you by Dr. Ari Zalmanah's Customer Insights Blueprint. Research is broken, and if you're using the same approaches to research that they were using in 1980, your business is already paying the price. Now, what if, in the next 12 weeks, you could build an insights machine inside your business that 10x's customer clarity, growth bets, and product decisions without hiring a single researcher? Get the strategic learning blueprint that helps you find hidden revenue for your business by finding hidden value in your customers, using the tools and teams you already have. Get it for free at beyonduxdesign.com/blueprint. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you know. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. Get instant access to those videos right now for as little as $5 a month. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. So if you're working on a design system and you think you're Kevin Costner, maybe you could build it and maybe they'll come. But the chances are good that if you build it, that's the easy part. The hard part is going to be getting people to use it, getting the stakeholders on board and all that stuff. It is not an easy task. And I have got my good buddy, Justin Cruz, on today, and he's gone through this himself. And we're going to talk about his experience and how you can get your team on board. I am so excited to have Justin on. Justin is an avid nerd, coffee enthusiast, and senior product designer at Manhattan Associates, leading complex strategy for global supply chain products. With a background in film and animation, Justin has built a diverse career, including consulting on next-gen jet experiences for Gulfstream, defining electric vehicle innovation strategy at Ford, and a stint as my bright-eyed colleague at GE Aerospace. This interview technically marks the second time Justin's been interviewed by me, and in his spare time, Justin mentors early career UXers at Mento Design Academy. What? Shout out to Mento. And is writing a novel, which I cannot wait to read, and enjoys playing big-ass board games with his wife. Justin, welcome to Beyond UX Design, dude. How is it going?
It's going, yeah. I'm interested. Did you when I said that this was the second time that you've interviewed me? Do you remember the first time
When he interviewed you at GE?
Yeah, it was like 45 minutes. I didn't know if you even remembered that.
Yeah, dude. That was so long ago, though. So this is crazy, dude, because I actually just had Stefan Thaler on the show a couple weeks ago, who also worked with us at GE.
Small world.
Yeah, I know, dude. And I've had Jeff Hendrickson on the show. So you are the third person that I have officially worked with out of like 100 and something interviews. So Justin, dude, I'm so excited to have you on. The third colleague that I've worked with. I've worked with some amazing people, by the way, and I am blessed to also have this platform to bring you on. And this time, lower stakes this time for this interview, by the way. But last time you did great, obviously. You got the job.
Thank you.
This time, I think you'll do just as good. Justin, dude, so we have this thing, I think this is something that a lot of people have experienced. They get in there, they do the design system, they design all the components, they figure out the perfect border radius and the colors and the topography and the spacing. They decide if they want to use base 4 or base 5, and they do that and all that stuff. but then they release the thing and nobody uses it. Before we get into it, tell us a little bit about you and ultimately your experience with design systems, and then we'll kick off this conversation, man.
Sure, yeah. So I came to UX from, like I said in the intro, a film and animation background. So I got my MFA at SCAD and piddled around in the animation space for a while and landed a job as a digital designer and discovered UX from there and fell in love with it from there. And the way that I've built my career has really been about, I think I'm an eternal student of the world. And really, the way I have approached new challenges and new roles has really been, can I learn something new here? And I think that that's how I've jumped from role to role is, have I sufficiently mined the area that I'm in, and is there a new challenge where I'm going? As far as design systems go, I have contributed to a number of them over the years, including at GE. We had a ground roots initiative there, and that doesn't seem to be that unique of a take at large organizations. I know a lot of places do have dedicated design system teams and things like that, but a lot of the time you're looking at people who have multiple roles taking on the act of design system management. Where I'm at now, I have built from the ground up a multi-product design system. So we have a suite of tools, not unlike the way GE was. We have a suite of tools, a suite of products that we are B2B. And this design system that I currently manage is really supporting and building consistency across a number of these digital applications, these web products.
I love it, dude. Yeah, and so that sort of from the ground up, organic, grassroots initiatives, how a lot of these tend to play out. And what's interesting is either if it comes from the top down or it comes from the bottom up, I've found is that you struggle with adoption at either level. If it's more organic and it's a grassroots level thing, then you might get engineers on board, but you might not. Some of them might use it, some of them might not. It's going to be very disparate use. Some people might use it more than others. If it comes from the top and another team is using something, this was something that I also experienced at GE Digital, where they had a team out in California create a design system and then forced everyone to use it. Engineers across the board complained because it was built on this one system they didn't like and they would rather use this, and so they fought against it. It's like you catch 22. If it comes from the bottom up, you have a problem with adoption across the board. If it comes from the top down, you have a problem with adoption across the board. And like we said in the intro, designing it is hard. Obviously, it's not easy to design a design system. To build a design system is a big challenge, but often getting people to use it is even harder. And so I'm excited to get into that today. I'm excited to hear your experiences here. So I want to talk about design systems specifically today around large orgs, because if you work at a small startup, creating a design system is probably more straightforward, I would assume. Obviously, designing the components, like we said, is not an easy feat on its own. But if it's you and a few other designers and a few engineers, adoption is not a huge problem. What I've seen is the adoption at these giant enterprise level teams where you've got maybe thousands of engineers, hundreds of engineers at least, many designers, bunch of stakeholders, and that's the kind of stuff. So I'm really excited to hear your experience about that today. What I would love to just sort of like back up a little bit and maybe from your perspective, when's the right time to start getting this buy-in? Because I feel like once you've designed it, it's probably too late. So I'd love to hear your perspective about before you even start designing stuff. How do you get people on the same page and make sure everyone understands what's involved?
So there's a lot there, and I think we can touch on like when's the right time and then how to get people involved. As far as the right time part, I think that there's a question about adoption in terms of large organizations, small organizations.
You know what? What if we rephrase this? Let me go back. Sorry, Ani. Ani's my editor, by the way. Let's go back then. Let's take a step back, because maybe there's a bigger question here about a design system in general. I guess when you're in a big enterprise org, you might have someone come down and say, we need to build this thing. And if you're an individual contributor, there's not much you can say about that. But you might be on a team and seeing a problem and thinking to yourself, a design system would be the answer. I guess my big question for you before we kick off the conversation would be, how do I even know if I need a design system? And is a design system from scratch the right approach? Or should I do something off the shelf or find material or some other kind of system that I can just purchase and use? How do you handle that conversation?
Sure. So the first thing, design systems off the shelf. I think the answer to that question is design systems are entirely context-based. So they're really solving the specific needs of your organization. So I think if you grab a design system off the shelf, that's fine. But really what that is more of a UI kit. And that's fine. That helps you build fast. I think the really the question to be answered is, what are you trying to solve using a design system? We don't, much like you, there's a metaphor in like sword fighting, right? Where you don't attack a participant's blade, right? You don't attack their blade, you attack them. Their blade is there to stop you. So, in the design system sense, we don't build a design system with the intent and the goal of it being used, which is why sort of adoption is not necessarily the best metric when we look at, is this successful? We design a design system as a tool to meet some sort of business objective. A lot of the time with larger organizations, that objective is so that we can build things faster, build things more consistently. You have a systemic issue, especially when you're end user facing, of getting a lot of feedback in terms of inconsistent experiences, because the end user, they see everything as one network or one body of work. And then like you're talking about with large organizations, they often are siloed from the perspective of, you've got this guy over here building this part of the product and this guy over here building this part of the product, and they don't always interact. So the question of like consistency, it starts to be about like, how do we measure success from a business perspective? Is, what are we trying to accomplish with this? And it's not adoption, because adoption is a trailing metric, right? It's really, what are we trying to do as a business? Are we trying to standardize a practice? Because that the question also comes up of like small organizations, or before you've built a product, right? If you don't have a product yet, does it make sense to build a design system? And I think with anything, the answer is it depends. But I think the difference between the small team and the large team is that with a small team, with a non-existent product, you have nothing to solve really. You're that sort of starts to be a little bit of a predictive activity. It's an activity in trying to predict, which potentially becomes a moving target, trying to predict the needs of your design team. Instead of doing that, I think the impetus when you are getting started in building a product should be to build the product. Let's not waste our time building tools to build the product consistently. I was having a conversation recently with our director of UX. We have this sort of new product space initiative that's getting kicked off, and I mentioned we had this from the ground up design system. That the question was like, how do we integrate that work into the existing system? And the product space is sort of Gen AI based and newer conceptual stuff. And what I told her was that design systems are not a tool for innovation. They're a tool for standardization. They're a tool for consistency, right? Like, we can't define rules at the design system phase. We define rules at the innovation phase, and then we standardize those rules through design systems. So like, we didn't have, when I worked at Ford, I worked in their innovation labs called D Ford, no longer exists, but we didn't have a design system at D Ford, because the whole impetus of D Ford, the whole reason it existed, was as a greenfield project. The original name of D Ford was actually Greenfield Labs. Greenfield, if your listeners are not familiar, is the concept of basically starting something, building something where something didn't exist before. And so this kind of ties in with the how to shift large organizations. The reason Ford built D Ford in general was because they had, I think, the intelligence at the time to see that they had a hard time innovating on their existing product cycle, because of how difficult it is to redirect a moving train. And so they were really like, we're going to take something and move it outside of our organization, use that to innovate. A long story short, the reason we didn't have a design system at Ford and we do at Manhattan is Ford was the whole, or D Ford was the whole point of it, was to break convention, was to define things that are next gen, or it was to do things non-conventionally. And if you have a design system that is supporting an initiative like that, you're already hamstringing yourself by dictating what the scope and capability of a innovation initiative is. At a larger organization that's more established, we spent a lot of time at Manhattan specifically getting foundational level design work happening and then converting all our work to the cloud. And we're at a point now, it really comes down to where you're at in your organization. We're at a point now where what we need from an organization is consistency, standardization. We want to be able to build things faster, and we want less strain on the developers and the relationship between the developers and the design. So you start to see there's a lot of churn in that collaboration. And so that starts to be where we see the value of a design system.
Sorry, dude, go ahead.
You're good. So if we look back at the idea of should I build a design system for a product that doesn't exist yet, I recommend you go and you build the product first, because what we don't want to do is build like an accordion and then ask the designer, like you said, force people to use our accordion because we spent the time building it, which is a sunk cost fallacy, and then realize as we go and do the actual work of product design, our accordion needs to be completely different. And then we spend the time rebuilding it, whatever. And we may have 10% utilization of this whole system. So we may build 100 components and then one of them gets used or 12 of them gets used, and you have, let's say, 12% utilization. A more valuable exercise in that smaller organization is let the product get built and then take, let's say, a button, right? We use a button everywhere in that design. Take that button, fold that button into a newly formed design system, right? Now you have 100% utilization of your system. Everything in your design system, for a fact, is getting used in the environment, is live. This is a real valid component. And then you can spend the time developing that relationship with engineering, getting that to be a base component that you can scene set between design and engineering. And then on the next project, you've got a feature improvement or a whole new product or whatever, you take that button, use that in your new design, and then also maybe grab the next component. So maybe we used a button now, and in the next design, we're using an accordion as well. Let's grab that accordion, fold that into the system. And so you start to organically build things that are needed rather than trying to, what you're saying happened with the people out in LA or California or whatever, is here's a bunch of stuff we think you might need, use it or else. And then you start to get friction in terms of the designers are not seeing the value of that because that's not the way that, or the things they have needed or whatever. Because I think if you give someone the things they need, why would there be pushback? That's what they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love how you call that out. It's a method for standardization, not innovation. And it's funny because one of the big critiques for design systems that designers often have is limiting. I can't come up with new stuff. And what's interesting, and I love how you call this out, you're designing it. And then in the case of GE, right, we had, at the time, GE Power, GE Aviation, GE Transportation, we had renewables, we had oil and gas, we had all these giant companies that were supposed to be building the digital industrial of tomorrow. And so someone was just like, we'll create a design system and all our apps will look the same. And then when it came time to actually utilize it, the pushback from the beginning was, this is not going to work. Like, everyone thinks they're a little snowflake and everyone thinks they're special. And so I can't use this component. This isn't going to work for me. And that was like one of the major issues that we ran into from back in the day. And it's funny because thinking back from what you're saying, thinking about it through that lens, no one even thought about that. Let's let the team build a thing and then find out what they need, and then we will build it. It was a completely separate team. They hired a team with no context about any of the other businesses that were trying to use it. And it was doomed from the beginning just by not taking into account what you're saying. And I love that. Just sort of like the direct opposite approach of what you think, right? Like, I guess it's interesting because you think about philosophically, like, what is a design system? Does a design system have to be a set of components and rules and things, or can it just be that one thing, like you said, and grow from there? I love that, I don't know, the reversal in thinking there.
Sure. I actually just had a conversation. I do a sync with my designers weekly, and I just had a conversation because we're building out more of our documentation for like common patterns and things like that. And I think it's important to call out that like a design system shouldn't be a series of rules, right? What they should be is a series of documented decisions that the team has made. That's why we call it documentation and not usage guidelines or not rules or a rule book or how to. We have collectively come together and said, for edits, this is how we handle that pattern. And that gets folded into the design system in the form of documentation. So what we're doing is we're basically just note-taking what we have decided as a team. It's not dictation, it's documentation. And I think there's a unique challenge at larger organizations, or really anywhere, but there's a unique challenge when we try to build a design system for an existing product, because I think that's where you start to get the pushback in terms of you're trying to standardize using something that feels foundational, like you're building the foundations, but all of the foundations in the environment, in the product already exist because this is a long existing product. So there's sort of a dichotomy there between what you're doing as an exercise and what it is serving. And I think my thought as somebody who builds design systems is, okay, let's stop. Let's talk about the button. What is critical in this phase of building out a design system is meeting with the designers and saying, okay, why is it not going to work? Let me get that insight and let's build the component that is going to work. Oh, we can't build just one component because X, Y, and Z. We need this flexibility here and this flexibility here. Okay, who cares? Let's build two components. That the point is that the design system is nothing. It doesn't dictate anything. I think similarly, we could look at the design system itself as a collection of decisions made by the team. It's a tool to help us get to the end goal, which is not to build designs, it's to solve problems. So if our problem solving, like we shouldn't be saying, I can only solve this problem using this instance of a component set to this variant. We should be saying, I'm going to solve this problem with this solution. And then maybe we can build that as a component if we feel that it's reusable, because it's also not like every solution needs to be a component. There are local instances that just don't, I think, dictate getting folded into a system. So one of the things that I did get that degree of pushback that we talked about when I first joined the team, we were transitioning from Adobe XD and the team hadn't really used a design system. And so in addition to just getting people up on Figma, there was a lot of, why are we using a design system? We definitely got questions from designers around, this is going to stifle our creativity. How is this going to work? A lot of these things. But when you look at the workflow of a lot of these people anyways, even in XD, what they were doing was grabbing components, essentially components, grabbing designs from older files and just pasting them into the new thing. So they're already doing design system activities, right? They're just worried about the idea of that dictation rather than, so what I did to start was, rather than build a bunch of stuff and throw it at them, let's have a conversation. What have you seen in development? What are we building a lot of? Are we using modals a lot? Are we using accordions a lot? What special things do we need in a design system in order for it to make us happy and for us to be able to build things faster? So we would meet once a week on a different component and say, let's just talk about accordions today. How have accordion, especially because we talk about it's different because we don't just have one accordion we've ever built. We're not a new product. We have 100 accordions we've built that may have 100 different variations from a consistency perspective. And so it's about, let's just take an hour and let's collect everything. Everybody else right here is the domain expert, right? Like I'm coming to them to lean on their expertise rather than, again, dictation. So let's come together. Let's talk about a button, an accordion, an alert, whatever, and really ask the question in a session of what do we need or what do we want this component to be as we move forward. And that, I think, did a lot to garner some goodwill with the team to understand that I'm here to manage the existence of this thing, but I'm not here to manage your design expertise or that human-centered design exercise of we're here to solve problems. I'm here to manage the development and execution of the tool that solves that problem.
Yeah, I love that. Now, you said something a second ago, and I want to circle around to this again, is this idea that you're going to start by just documenting what we already do before you start dictating. And as we think about how a team grows, and in your case and in the previous examples, we had multiple teams, multiple products, all potentially designing different things. When it comes time for each of those groups who have started to document to then standardize, this is often where a lot of the pushback comes from because, I think psychology even plays a lot into this. It's the other team. It's not my team. It's the others. And they don't know how we work or they don't understand the problems we have. And everyone thinks their team is special. But I'm curious when it comes time to taking that, because I love that approach, by the way. It's just such a simple way to kind of shift your mindset and start applying it, which it works, I think, or I see great potential with smaller teams when it's just you. The question I have is when you try to now standardize, when you get to the point when you say, all right, we've innovated, but now we need to standardize. How do you get those two teams together and coalesce around one design system?
I will say, no matter what, standardization is messy, right? Because it goes back to that, like, how do we redirect a moving train? And that's a hard thing to do because teams are incentivized to produce quantity often rather than quality, right? So it can often feel, this is why in sprint, in what's the word? Not, what are sprints part of?
Like ceremonies, cycles,
There's a term there.
product life cycle, PDLC.
Oh, I'm blanking on the term. Agile.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I couldn't, in my head. That's why development teams will build into agile cycles, sprint cycles, the idea of addressing tech debt. What we have, because it sucks to do and everybody doesn't want to go back and reassess. And so part of standardization is taking a look at what exists and finding that middle ground, but that might mean that none of the teams have the solution already. It could be like, here's team A and their solution is what we adopt worldwide. And that does mean that teams B through Z do have to get in line, and there's a tough thing there. But similar to the simple strategy I have for design system building, my strategy approach for stakeholder management is really a single question, and that's what's in it for me. And that's how I have always approached stakeholder management is you're talking to another party and they need you to answer that question, what's in it for me. And so that's always the thinking is like what does the other person get out of this? What can I give the other person such that they can get in line with the strategy that we need? So obviously it's great to talk to all of these different teams, gather their needs and feedback, and then ultimately you've got to make a decision. And sometimes that ruffles feathers from the perspective of this team does have to go back and re-architect their color variables, and that's a bitch, right? I don't know if can I cuss?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I didn't before. Go ahead.
So that's a pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
What sucks is going to a team and saying, hey, you guys did a bad job. You need to re-architect your color variables. Why did you do this in the first place? Instead, I think the approach is, hey, we took a look at what exists in the environment and we noticed these inconsistencies, which, again, there's another side of what's in it for me. It's what is the risk if I don't do this thing? And I think those are the two sides of the coin, the sort of handout that you give people is we saw this inconsistency that can lead to this problem. But if we do this activity that you may not want to do, you'll get this outcome. You'll have better accessibility so we don't potentially deal with a concerns or anything like that. You'll have more consistent, especially in the B2B space with we're working supply chain management. So a lot of the work we're doing is being so specific about reducing the number of clicks to a task that's super repetitive, do 100 times a day. And if we can say that this sweeping change reduces or can potentially have a positive impact on the customer's experience, then you start to get into what is this person's carrot for your stick effectively.
Yeah, I love that. So here's a question. I want to talk a little bit going back to what we mentioned a minute ago is this sort of two ways it could go. You could have someone dictating from the top or you could have from the bottom more organically. And I want to talk a little bit about, for our purposes, I feel like there's a lot of people that are listening right here that are probably dealing with this more from the bottom up organically. When they work on a team, there might not be a standard, there might not be a design system team. No one has set aside budget to pay people to focus on this. And so you end up with what we talked about earlier, where you've got people wearing many hats. They're probably working on a product, but also helping to just volunteer their time, at work at least, to a few hours a week or whatever, setting aside a time to manage a design system, create a design system, things like that. And I'd love to get your thoughts here from thinking about that from someone from this perspective. So if you are in a situation like that and you realize, hey, we need a design team, what do you try to do in that situation? Do you try to build a robust design system? Do you do the bare minimum? Is there some advice that you give to people when you get in that scenario?
I think the easy answer is don't swallow a bus. I don't know if that's a phrase, but that's something I'm going to say. I think the actual one is don't try to drink the whole ocean or something like that. But I like to say don't swallow the bus, which means you are one person, you can only have so much impact. You're 12 people, you can only have so much impact. So I think trying to set, this is like any initiative, right? Like you're writing a novel, maybe don't try to write the whole thing. Try to write the first page. The journey of 1,000 steps starts with a single step or whatever, 1,000 miles, single step. Who cares? The point is start with something that's manageable, that has an impact, right? So I think it goes back to whether your product is pre-existing and super robust or your product is nascent and you have built out your first landing page. I think the answer to that question is often the same, which is just start with a button, man. Just build something that we know is able to be used, and let's just build from there. I built a lot in the course of a quarter, right? I built all of our atoms and started to work on our molecules, and that was because I had a lot of time to focus on that. But that doesn't mean that that's all getting used or getting implemented, especially from dev, right? You actually might be better spent rather than building an entire system in a week, like a sweaty week. You might be better off saying, I'm going to build a button and I'm just going to talk to dev and say, hey, what about this button? How do you feel about this? Does this work? Can we get to a place where over the course of a month or 2 months, let's just meet once a week for an hour and say, let's talk about the button. How are we doing on the button? We actually do have an initiative with a team that's building this common component library called Web Components. That's a base component. I don't want to get into the weeds of that, but we do that with that team of engineers, and we actually meet with them and say, all right, we're going to keep talking about this thing we've been talking about. It may take a long time, but you're one person, and oh, boil the ocean. Don't boil the ocean.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. That's
Yeah,
okay.
you're one person. So I think it's really down to where can my efforts have the largest impact? And it's often not getting into the weeds with things that aren't going to get implemented. You may honestly just start with a UI kit. If that's the thing that you can do that makes your job easier, building the components that you see getting used regularly, I might just build a button today. You don't have to start by architecting the entirety of your primitives and your semantic variables. You can back into that over time. This may be, I don't know, not the best advice, but I think there is the practical experience of people in this situation that, you know, you can't build the perfect system, but you can build a system that is able to add value.
Yeah. I was just thinking too, like, I loved your advice from before about maybe building something isn't even the right approach for you at this point. Maybe it's just documenting. Maybe it's just keeping track of everything so that you start to build a repository of knowledge that you can then use to influence somebody to help finance a design system or just show, hey, look how often we're reusing this thing and look how often all of our teams are doing something different and look how disparate it is across our products or our offerings. And like before you even spend time to say, here's the solution, what if you spent the time documenting it to help prove a point so that later when it comes time to influence, you have that data to back it up? It's observing. I love that.
That's actually exactly what I did when I joined Manhattan. So I think it can get to be really overwhelming when you join a new team and there is a Goliath of an enterprise piece of software. And the question is, how do I build something that supports and standardizes experiences across something that I don't even fully understand? I still, even today, don't fully understand much of the work that goes on across all this body of products. I haven't seen probably half the pages that exist. But what I started with was, okay, let's just look at a page and get into the inspect tool, right? I literally opened Chrome, got the inspect tool, and just looked at a page and looked at the color variables and looked at the text variables and looked at how they were setting some of these things up. And I put together a quick, this was like week 2 or something. I can't remember how early it was, but it was super early on. And I just was able to say, okay, we have 12 color variables used on this page. They all encapsulate like a very small percentage of contrast. All of them are very similar, and like 4 of them are the same color, getting referenced in different places as different colors. And so just being able to say, here are some problems that I see, and just making that known, and then you can use that information instead of immediately coming in and saying, I know they need a button, I'm going to build a button, going and saying, what's happening actively? And then we've had conversations with our development team when we get into, okay, we're going to build a design system and here's why we need buy-in from you guys. That analysis, that audit that I did came into play because I was able to show, okay, we didn't just create a new color scale, a gray color scale. We looked at the system, identified some areas where we could use improvements, and this is what came of that. So we started with this, got rid of all of the nonsense colors, and then used the base value of this color system that pre-existed, and we built a new, more robust, more complete light to dark color scale out of that. And so it's not just saying fix your shit, it's saying here is what we've seen, and here's how we can continue to use it to grow our accessibility, grow a number of different things.
Yeah, I love that. You bring something up that I hadn't even considered talking about today, and I didn't even put it on our outline. But something that I have seen many designers do is joining a new team that has been an established team that's been working for years. They join a new team as a new hire, and immediately they start suggesting, we need a design system, we need to do this, look at everything, it's different, and blah, blah, blah. And they're seen as an outsider, and often those people are completely rejected out of hand because they have no idea the context. They don't understand why anything is the way it is. They don't really understand the specific needs of the teams. They're brand new and they're just like coming in hot, suggesting everyone is doing things wrong. And I think about this just from a consultant's perspective as well. You know, doing consulting myself, going in and often being seen as an outsider,
Sure.
immediately suggesting that people are doing things wrong, and you have somehow this magic fix for it, you're often, almost every time, immediately rejected. And so you're just almost wasting your time at that point. I hadn't even considered talking about that. I don't know if you've experienced that or you have anything to add.
Oh, absolutely.
But I've seen so many times.
So I actually used to work in a consultancy as well, and was asked to build a design system from the ground up because they had disparate design systems. They had 4 different systems. And what I decided to do instead of designing a design system, because like you're talking about with the California team, how valuable is it if I don't understand your processes to build a system, box it up, hand it off, and say, good luck? That doesn't solve their need. Their need is or at least the need I assessed was that how do they manage this thing themselves, right? Because they clearly struggled to manage it up to this point. What they don't need is dictation. What they need is a plan. So what I came up with, instead of building components, because like you said at the top of the hour, building components is not hard, right? You can Google how to build literally any component. You can get a community version of literally any component. Like you can go to the big ones, Polaris, Atlassian, all these different design systems, and they have community facing versions of components, and you can just ad hoc steal those. So that part's not hard. The part is, how do we make all of these disparate things make sense and work for us? So what I built was a plan of scalability in terms of, this is what I think you should start with. And that the work is all on you guys, right? Because if I build it, you don't understand it. So you guys build it, but this is how you build it. Start with this core. And then once you have, over however many months, years, whatever, once you have that core, this is what you should add on top of it. So it's that stacking block analogy or whatever. So I basically gave them the tools. You teach a man to fish, whatever. I gave them the tools to build the thing themselves so that they could act on it, rather than saying, here's just, because again, like you said, you can just download a fully robust design system, but it feels a little bit like you're trying to plug something into a socket that doesn't fit, or you have to have a contractor come in and re-architect your wall so it fits.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's such a brilliant way to do that, too. If you're listening and you're a consultant and you come in, instead of handing them the solution, say, I fix it, magic, ta-da, here you go, provide them with the tools to do it themselves. That is such a brilliant way to do it. And that's more scalable, too. Because the other thing I was thinking about, I've also worked at a company that paid an outside agency to come in and create a design system. And it was like 5 years ago. They actually won like a Red Dot Design Award for it. And when you look at the stuff that's been implemented, you're just like, this won a Red Dot Design Award? What the hell? This is awful. The engineers have basically, and because of this, by the way, they didn't have a design team. They just had engineers take the crap that this agency did, and it was a mess.
Yeah, it sounds like a recipe for success.
Yeah, it was awful. And they had this engineering team just grabbing a bunch of crap that this agency threw over the fence and said, good luck, see ya, I hope it works out for you. And it was just, from my perspective at least, it was not good.
I don't think
so. That's just not good.
I don't think having a team come in and build it is the worst thing in the world, but I think that it is missing a step, which is, I think adoption is a little bit of a dirty word, but I think it is getting it actually integrated into a team that is the activity that needs to happen. Whether I build it or whether somebody else builds it and then helps me use it, I think the exercise is the same. It's still about getting it into use. It's the same conversation with, if we don't have anything, let's build a button and then ensure that button's getting used. It still comes down to use.
So that's perfect perfect segue into what I wanted to talk about next, which was adoption. You've built the thing. I know we don't want to fall for the sunk cost fallacy. I built this thing, no one's using it. If it's not good, no one's going to use it. But let's say you've built a great thing and you know that it's going to be successful. It's going to improve our efficiency and make everybody faster and all those things that we care about. How do you get a team to adopt it? And I'm specifically thinking about this from the ground up organic method that we talked about. Less sticks. You don't really have the means to disincentivize people from not using it. But how do you make the team use it, especially if you don't have authority or control?
Yeah, I was lucky coming into Manhattan in the sense that we already had a director of UX who saw the value of a design system and was championing that. But I think it really just comes back to asking the question, what's in it for me, for the person that you're trying to get to adopt it? Part of that, I think, is building things that you as a designer need. Because if you're building things that you as a designer need, you're building things that your colleagues as designers may need. Anticipating those needs in the sense that you can see what's getting built and you can design faster ways to act on that, right? So, for example, we have a suite of tools that all use the same header, right? They all use the same main menu, they all use the same breadcrumb bar, they all use the same tabbed header, they all use the same left menu, right? So instead of having designers have to build that themselves, let's build a component that they can grab that they don't have to think about that part of the solution. And it supports all of the different versions of that header that they may need. I think if you can get a champion too of your tool, even if just one champion other than you, it starts to show the rest of the team, like, it's just getting them acclimated to the idea that we're not dictating again. We're just here to add value. And the people who are using this system are building things faster. They're not having to focus on the point of it is not to constrain creativity. It's to be able to actually focus on solving problems, right? If I'm not having to think about the layout of an input and going to hunt down an input that I've built 7 different times, if I can just grab an input and I know that I'm able to configure that in the course of 10 seconds, that I think that value to the other designers, and we're talking specifically about designers, starts to become evident. Like, they don't want to be focusing on technical things. They want to be focusing on solving problems and on strategy, because that's one of the big things that is UX, is not building components and designing, it's designing strategy. Yeah, I think showcasing also is huge. Just exposing the system, talking about what you're doing and getting it out into the world and having people see that it's there. I mentioned too that I started holding sessions for all the designers that use the system and really just giving it a forum for people to talk about components, like talk about the types of components that they're using. Whether or not we talk about the system itself, we can just talk about, it can even be less of a conversation about what we want in the system and more of a conversation about how have we typically handled modals? How have we handled whatever? And it becomes more of a, let me learn from you. Let's come together and discuss this thing that maybe we don't discuss. Do we want to have shelves that have sort of a indentation, drop shadow, whatever? Are there things that we want to standardize about certain patterns or expertise or experiences?
Yeah. I love that, dude. That's such a great way to think about it too. I love like showcasing it and just sort of like doing it yourself for a little bit, getting people on board that way. I think the conversations, going out and talking to the engineers and understanding like, why are you not sharing components? Why are you building a new thing every time? And then talking to other designers, same thing. Do your research. Treat this like any other UX problem, right? The system is the product. You have to sell it to somebody. You have to convince them to adopt it, not pay for it with their money, but pay for it using their time. And why would they not use it? What would keep them from using it? What would drive them to use it? And I think that's a lot of times like we think we build it and the people are going to start using it, and that's never the case. And understand like that question, man, what's in it for me? That's such a great way to think about stakeholder management. And when we think about stakeholders, we often think about managers, CEOs, executives, whatever. But
Yeah.
when it comes to design systems, like the engineers have a stake in how the design system works. Other designers have a stake in how things work. So I think it's a great way to think about it.
I think a true stakeholder map, we used to do this at Ford. We had stakeholder mapping exercises. It's really a series of concentric rings, right? It's not just, let me adhere to C-suite or product leaders or whatever. It starts with your core team. Your core team is stakeholders, right? And then I think you have an extended team. You may have a product manager, or you may have SMEs that may be part of an extended team. Regardless of who they are, if they have an impact on the experience, mapping their impact, and part of stakeholder management is about asking the question of how do we as a team engage with this individual, right? Do we want, are they someone that we need to get approvals from? Are they someone that they need to be plugged into every aspect of this? Are they someone who we just need to check in with at key milestones? Are they somebody who doesn't want to have to give their approval, but really just wants visibility into everything that's going on? And that impacts how we engage with different stakeholders. Ford was huge because we had all of these different disparate products, right? So if I'm working on an electric vehicle, if it's a commercial vehicle, you have people from the EV side of things and you have people from the commercial side of things that all want to get sort of their fingers in the pot. The question is, we don't want to waste the head of the commercial team's time getting into the nitty gritty of specific strategy. We bring those people in at specific times and engage them when it is most relevant to the value that they can add to the product or the project. So it's really about being intentional about how we engage with different entities, whether that's engineering or our design team. Like from a design system perspective, designers are a sort of a ring of influence, and then from there, so is our engineering team.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, dude. All right, so we've had you for a little while. I got to start wrapping this up, unfortunately. The last thing I want to talk about before we get out of here is just how do we know if our efforts have paid off? How do we know if this thing was a success? We talked a little bit before about how adoption is a bad metric to use. But I'm curious, how do we actually measure this? If we do get budget, let's say someone wants to give us a year or 6 months, however long, at the end of that time period, how do we know if our effort...
Sure. So I don't think necessarily adoption is a bad metric. I just think it's a trailing metric. So I think one of the ways we can look at has implementing a design system been a success is looking at prior to building, are design systems getting, or the design system team, are they getting included in conversations earlier? Similar to, is UX a success? What's the biggest problem that UX tends to come up against from an organizational perspective? It's almost always that UX doesn't have a seat at the table early enough to make impact. We really need to be in the room when we're doing scoping and when we're doing roadmap conversations. I think if we can start to see design systems getting included in those conversations, that starts to be a leading indicator that design systems are seeing value, not as a tool, but as part of a process to get us to a solution. So we're starting to look at, are there ways that the design system can help us solve this problem? Like, it's not, did the design system help us solve this problem? It's, can the design system help us solve this problem? So it's a little bit of a flip on that. I think there are also, again, I don't think trailing metrics are bad because you can use both, right? But I do think it's about defining business objectives rather than how many times was this component used in a month. So it starts to look at, like, for us, it was about being able to clean up inconsistencies, being able to build faster and with less friction. So I think track those metrics for your own individual organization and look at, from the implementation of a design system, are we engaging with engineering in a way that is a less friction filled because of the introduction of componentry or whatever aspect of that? Are we building things faster? Is it because we don't have to spend as much time churning on hand coding everything?
Yeah.
I think from the
So
design...
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, there's a lot of different ways that people are going to look at the value of design systems, and it really depends on who you ask. Like, designers, obviously, they can build faster, but that's not necessarily a great metric unless it leads to them being able to spend more time. Like, we don't want to just build fast, right? Because that starts to get into quantity rather than quality. We don't want to just throw things out the door and not look back and keep building the next thing. We want to be able to focus less on the things that are not solution oriented and focus more on things like, are we able, because we have a design system, to do more design thinking exercises? Are we able to spend more time doing workshops and discovery work, talking to customers and things like that, solving real problems? So I think those are good metrics to look at that are sometimes soft metrics. They're not necessarily something that you can get into an analytics dashboard.
No, I was going to ask some of that. So, when it comes to, we talk about consistency as one of the main goals. How do you measure consistency? Because there's not press a button and consistency score shows up on a dashboard like you said somewhere. I'm curious, like when you think about things like that, are these just more qualitative? You're just looking at it, and or are you maybe looking at like customers complaining about things being confusing because things
Sure,
are
you could do.
patterns are different? I'm curious how you do that.
So I think there are a couple ways you can look at it. Obviously, you can do audits. That's just like a line of sight. You can see, or even just like when we do weekly reviews with devs, we can see less stuff coming back that is completely nonsensical, text sizes, colors, button borders, or inconsistent. Stuff like that happens less, and that's qualitative. But also, if we know design is going out the door with connected components from a design side, we know that designers are handing off designs connected to main components. We don't have to worry as much about inconsistencies between button uses, right? Because we're not hand defining padding on every button independently of one another, right? So you don't have to track that because you know that people are using this and that's getting handled at the base system. And I think on the other side of that, if developers are pulling from a repository of pre-built components, like if they have a coded version of the button and individual dev teams are pulling that code, that piece of design of that piece of code into their system, then we don't necessarily have to worry as much on average about whether or not there are inconsistencies, because the consistency is being handled at the commonality level, right? Like we if we can adopt these teams using more of these components more often, then that already ensures that we don't have to track every use of a button or every use of an accordion. We're saying we can get the buy-in from individual teams to agree that there is value in not hand coding these things. So it comes from both sides, but it really comes down to getting a common library and getting buy-in to use it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Some teams I used to be on, and again, this is maybe outside of the direct control of the design team, but we would set up processes where they would do code reviews and, hey, you've hard coded a hex value here instead of using a variable, or you've hard coded a pixel spacing or something. We have variables for all these in our SAS file. That was something that a lot of times, if you're not familiar with that as a designer, obviously this is where I think understanding how code is written, not being a coder, I wouldn't say the whole should designers learn to code? No, but I think you should have a base understanding of how that thing you're designing gets implemented so that you can help check for these things. That's something that our teams would do in the past.
I think that designers don't necessarily need to know how to code. Designers need a good relationship with engineering, right? They need to be able to have an open dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah. And being able to speak their language at the very least. When you know what a SAS variable is, you don't have to learn how to write a SAS style sheet or anything. I think understanding that so that when you can go and review these things, you can help suggest edits, or you can inspect in Chrome or something and say, hey, those pixels are off. Like here, why aren't you using that size? So,
and I think if you're seeing a lot of conversations at the individual implementation level of, hey, I see you've hand coded this, that starts to be like, we need to get buy-in from an organizational perspective of engineering leads, of the engineering leadership, to trickle this process down to individual teams. Mm-hmm. If they're getting it both if it's only designers telling them that they're not using variables, then I don't know that that's as effective strategy as having the whole engineering organization bought in on the way we collaborate.
Exactly. I missed that completely when I explained it. But obviously, in order to have your QA check for these things, or code review process check for these things, there has to be buy-in from the engineering team. So that's something that I do first. That question that we asked before about what's in it for me. Obviously, that's this question you need to ask. And not long ago, it's funny, we talked about Stefan earlier. We had a conversation about this exactly, like understanding stakeholders and how to message what you want, how to talk about what you want in a way that they care about. And so I think that's such like an important, it's funny, this is like these two conversations tie in so much here, but you can't just say we need a design system and then expect everybody to get on board with it. You've got to speak their language and the what's in it for me question. I love that. All right, Justin, so we've had you for a long time now. And unfortunately, we can't talk all day, although I would love to. We could probably talk about all this stuff all day. Grab some coffee, play some board games. We were just talking about this the other day. I mentioned like something about my first Dungeon Master, and the first time I ever played D&D was with you. And that was a
Yeah.
fun little anecdote. Anyway, we
Yeah,
could
I
talk
used to
about
run.
design systems over D&D all day. I love it, dude. Good stuff. Memories, man. Memories. All right, so before we get out of here, any closing thoughts? Anything we didn't get a chance to touch on that you think is just critical for these individual contributors to know about design systems?
Yeah, I think don't try to do it all at once. It is definitely a sprint, not a marathon. I think back to something that drives a lot of the work I do and really my personal life is, have you ever read Atomic Habits? They talk about in Atomic Habits the 1% rule. And there's a whole story about the British cycling team and how they went from being terrible to being great. And it's really about the idea of adding 1% of value every day or every whatever. And I think that that's an important thing to contextualize for everyone, whether it's a personal or professional thing, is you don't have to build the whole design system at once. You don't have to, even if you're looking at like career development, right? You don't have to jump to being director of UX all at once. Today, it's like, where can I add value that's 1% improvement so that if I look back at myself a year ago or look back at the design system a year ago or a quarter ago, have we moved forward? Have we done that 1% improvement? I think if you're stagnating and you can't answer that question positively, that's when maybe you need to start assessing change.
I love it. All right, dude. So before we get out of here, I've got a few questions I'd like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. Do you have some time to stick around and answer some 5 ridiculously silly, simple questions to help us get to know Justin a little bit better? You got some time?
Let's do it.
All right, dude. Let's do it. First up, what is your favorite non-design book?
Okay, I have 2 answers to this. I'm going to do a professional one and a nerdy one. My professional one is Packing for Mars by Mary Roach. It's a really interesting look at the ways that we essentially did a bad job going to space. So it's about space exploration, but it's basically through the lens of UX. So it's a lot of, she goes and does research about a bunch of different space programs across the world, the Japanese program, the Russian program. And she looks at a lot of historical anecdotes about going to space and how we have done a bad job and a good job of optimizing that experience. The nerdier one is, I'll call out The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, which I started reading in middle school, and now it has a show on Amazon. They're in their 3rd season. And then more recently, I've really enjoyed Dungeon Crawler Carl and the Murderbot Diaries series. Murderbot just got a trailer on Apple TV Plus.
I was going to say, isn't that like a TV show?
Yeah, it's a series of novellas. There's like 5 or 7 of them or something. But they're really short, but they're good reads.
Right on. And it's like a comedy sci-fi thing, right?
Yeah, it's funny. The whole conceit is this robot develops sentience, or I guess is able to control himself, and all he really wants to do is watch soap operas, but he ends up having to save the day.
What is there's no spoilers. I was going to ask what murder has to do with it, but maybe that's just like a catchy title.
He is a killbot.
No spoilers.
Like the initial intent of the robot is that they are like combat droids essentially, and he has named himself Murderbot. That's his name for himself.
Oh, but all he wants to do is watch soap operas.
Yeah.
I love it. Man, I don't have an Apple TV subscription, and so I can't watch
a lot of good stuff these days.
Severance and stuff. I know, dude. I know. We'll see. One of the other ones is going to have to go for me to pick up Apple, but
that's what we do. We'll say, let's just clean out the slate from one product and then just jump to the next one, clean everything out there. There's too much to have it all.
I know, dude. Exactly. I love it. Yeah. And it just ends up being like, I was talking to somebody the other day about this. Like, we all ditched cable to go streaming, and now streaming is more expensive than freaking cable.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Anyway, I feel like there's a pivot coming soon, but I don't know. We'll see. All right. Next up, what is your favorite non-design podcast?
All right. So the ones that are my weekly listens are The Lonely Island and Seth Meyers podcast. They're really good. I'm not a fan of SNL, but I'm a fan of The Lonely Island, and they do a really good job talking through like the history of it. Another one is My Brother and Me, which is a comedy advice podcast that's top charts of comedy podcast. And then the one that I listen to on Fridays is The Besties, which is where I get my video game news.
Right on. Is that what you listen to on Fridays?
Yeah.
Okay. You're just like it's just like you save it for Friday. Get your like draw a warm bath. Get a glass of red wine.
Hey, that sounds great. I love a bath.
Yeah, you're right, baby. All right. So what is your favorite meal?
Hot wings. The favorite in Atlanta is currently Blue Moon Pizza. It used to be Taco Mac, but they sold to a new owner and they suck now.
So what you say, like chicken wings?
Like
buffalo
like
wings?
Buffalo chicken wings.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So just regular old hot sauce, not anything fancy, just straight up.
Sure,
original.
I'm sure anyone from Atlanta is going to be like Lemon Pepper King, but I'm definitely more of a Buffalo hot
Yeah.
habanero. I used
Oh
to
yeah.
go full spice. I actually won a hot wing eating challenge, not a competition, but a challenge, and I got a T-shirt
Really?
for it. But
Nice.
it wasn't even that. It was like 8 or 10, but it was
Oh, but it was
just
just
like,
the heat. Okay.
yeah, it was just the heat. It was at a tavern up in, I think, Marietta or something. The guy who runs the restaurant had to sit at our table with us to watch me do it, and it's just like a Tuesday or something. So we're just sitting there having a conversation while this guy just joins us for our meal.
Was it
Um,
so? I just was the guy like interacting with you guys at all, or was he just
yeah,
like
no,
staring at you?
we
Okay, he was
basically had
hanging out.
dinner with
Okay,
this guy.
okay, because I can see that going two ways. Like one just being very jovial, like hanging out, and the
Absolutely
other just
silent.
like staring at you the whole time. I love it, dude. When I was younger, man, I used to be all about the heat, and I would go to like
Can't do it
Thai
anymore.
restaurants and just like hot as you know. Now, dude, I'm in my 40s now,
I
and
have to
my
make
body just does not agree.
I have to make specific decisions about what my next day is going to be like.
Oh, I love it, dude. I love it. Yeah, I default to like low heat now, just like a
Yeah,
little spice, little kick. But not, if I like can't handle it afterwards, I'm like, you know what? I'm too old for this shit. It just ruins the whole meal. Day I
absolutely.
was young and stupid. Now I'm old and wise. All right, next up, what is your favorite vacation spot?
I think my wife and I's favorite travel destination is Paris, which is actually the only place we've gone to twice. But I will say I really enjoyed Prague and would love to go back. And Brussels sucks.
Brussels sucks. Why is Brussels suck? Is it just a big
It
city?
was just kind of a vanilla, bland. I don't know, man. We did not enjoy. We actually ended up staying in, watching Taken, and then we took a day trip to Ghent, which was a lovely little city. It's in the same country, but it's just like a train ride.
Were the waffles any good in Belgium? Were they
We got these little waffles that they have like a waffle that has French fries in it, and they do like a whole
oh,
sauce
like a
and stuff.
savory waffle? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. We did
Okay.
that in Ghent, and that was really nice.
See, I feel like that would almost be like starch overload, though. Like,
Sure.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah, whatever. I tried, dude.
The big place that we want to go
yeah.
to, we had plans scheduled in April of 2020 to go to the Mont Saint Michel, which is on the coast of Normandy. It's a big abbey. If you know anything about history, that trip didn't happen. So that's big on our list.
What, COVID killed that, I think,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
There was
yeah,
April
yeah,
2020 where
yeah,
I think we went fully remote in March.
yeah. Oh man, it's a bummer. Yeah, dude. You know, I'm like with me, like I've only ever been to Europe for work, so I can't really say I've done this. But for me, it's the little small towns in Europe, the little like villages and just like the
Absolutely.
quaint little cozy where there's not a lot of tourists and you can just have a bike and ride a bike around, hang out at a little cafe or something. That's like my ideal vacation. I don't know.
One of my favorite experiences when we were in Venice, I think, was we found this little hole in the wall wine shop. And while we were in there, like they didn't sell bottles of wine, they just had a bunch of jugs behind them. And locals would come in and they'd just be carrying like a 2 liter of Sprite, like an empty 2 liter of Sprite, and they would just hand it over and the guy would just fill it, right? So we
I
went
love
in
that,
there
dude.
thinking
That's
we could get
awesome.
some wine, and we were like, oh, they don't sell wine. So we went to a convenience store and got like a liter bottle of water and just dumped it and came in and he filled it for $5.
Oh, that's amazing. Where
Yeah,
was that? What city was that in?
Venice.
Oh, Venice. Oh, that's amazing. I love that, dude. That's awesome. Just go to like a little local baker, get like some bread and a little baguette somewhere. And if you're in France, get like some cheese and some wine. And if you're in Italy, like some salami or something. Oh my
Sure.
god.
But some of my favorite experiences in France are trying to speak to the locals and having them look at me like I'm speaking tongues.
Oh, you're trying to speak French?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
practiced it for years, but talking to a local is a
Oh,
whole
sure.
other
Yeah,
experience.
yeah. I love that. Yeah, I was trying to learn Hungarian for a long time because when I was at GE, we had
That's
that team in Hungary. And it was very
yeah.
hard. But I got to the point, though, dude, which is I feel like this is a win. It was like a failure on my part, but a win. Like I would go to Hungary a couple times and I would stay there for 2 weeks. I would go to like coffee shops and stuff. Anyway, I would try to order.
Budapest has great coffee shops.
Amazing, dude. Yeah, the best. So I would go in and I would try to order in Hungarian. And one of two things would happen. When I first started going, they would all reply to me in English because pretty much
That's what
everybody
happened to me in
Budapest.
France too.
Yeah, pretty much everybody in Budapest speaks English. At least the places where I would hang out, I guess. A little
Yeah.
in Budapest, at least, most people spoke English, moderately, especially in stores and stuff. A lot of tourists. So anyway, we would go in and they would order, and they would reply to me in English, or they would reply to me in Hungarian. And I was just like, I actually ordered coffee. I have no idea what you just asked me. Would you like it to go or whatever? And I'd be like, I'm sorry. I actually was trying to speak. I don't
I'm
actually
so
know what
sorry.
you just said. So,
I
I
did.
would get it when they spoke English. And then I was like, I want to practice. But then when they would speak Hungarian, I'd be like, I'm sorry. I have no idea what you said.
Yeah, it's a dichotomy because you're like, I want to practice your language. And they're like, no, I want to practice your language.
Yeah, exactly.
My one flex was that I did have a 10-minute conversation one time with just some rando that had walked up and we were like asking directions or something. It took us like a good 10 minutes into the conversation before she realized that I was American. So that was pretty cool.
Wow, dude. Yeah.
It
so
did
she
turn
didn't
out
recognize your
that
accent.
she
That's
was an
great.
expat. So
Oh,
not
okay.
local, but I'm going to take the win.
Dude, yeah, take it. You know what? In France, they're very particular about their language and accents and stuff. So if you fooled even an expat, I don't know. I feel like that's a win.
I'll take
All
it.
right, last question. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
I have two answers to this as well. As it relates to UX, a whiteboard. I love whiteboards, and I literally installed one in my laundry room. I love a sketch. I love to. It's such an easy
love
way
that,
to be able to just think physically. So that outside of UX, I think After Effects is probably the one that I've spent the most time in. Again, I have a background in animation, so I can Toon Boom and what's the Maya. Those things long gone for me, but After Effects is probably the one I've spent the most time in. Or Procreate on the iPad, which is great, or just Legos.
Legos.
I have my
Ooh,
little
that's
Lego
a
back here.
first. Dude, look at this. I got a few extra
Yeah.
stuff here. I got my whole little set.
It's great to just
I
like
never thought
physically
of that
build
as a design
something.
tool. Yeah, dude, I freaking love Legos. It's like I don't spend a lot of money on drugs, so why not spend a lot of money on Legos?
Yeah, and honestly, if you
what the
spend a
hell?
lot of money on drugs, maybe Legos is the move too.
And the nice thing about Legos is they keep the resale value pretty well if you can keep the kits together.
The thing people think about Legos now as a kit, right? You buy a Lego car and you build the car and they tell you how to build the car. But like growing up, I don't know if this was the way it was for you, but growing up, we just had a big bucket of Legos, right? Like they didn't do the kits like they do now. So to me, that's still a building tool, right? Like we used to build that car, but we had no blueprint.
Yeah, so we had the big kit. I had the big box of Legos. But when I would get a kit, maybe it's because I didn't have that many, but when I would get the kit, I would leave it together. And I would get really anal about taking it apart. And at my mom's house, up in her attic, I still have the boxes. I have the booklets. I have like
Wow.
all of that, dude, just together because I didn't want to take them apart because I liked building the model. Because I did the little like the random pieces building like a little car, but it looked like shit. It never looked anything close. It was actually in the kit when you would buy it, and I cherished that. And I would play with it like they were toys, like cars. I wouldn't really take them apart once I built it, but I did have the big bin of random Lego pieces as well.
Yeah,
would,
I
like,
think
kinda
they're doing
supplement, but
two
yeah.
different things. I
Yeah.
think the act of creating something intentionally or the act of discovery through building, they're both valuable.
I love it, dude. All right, Justin, we've had you for quite a while. We've got about 5 minutes left in our meeting here. And then you got to get out of here, probably go to another meeting. Before we get out of here, let everybody know where they can find you. Give yourself a plug.
Sure, I'm on LinkedIn. There you go. I have a website. It's my name with 3 N's. That's it.
All right, I love it, dude. And do you like coaching and stuff, though? Do you want to plug that at all?
Coach through Minto. I'm not on any of the ADPs of the world.
That's all right. You're better off for that anyway, I think.
That was my
Good call.
out. So
I love it, dude. I love it when we have guests that come on and have nothing to sell. They're just here to share knowledge. So
hey,
that
I'm
makes me
just a
happy.
dude.
Just a dude with a lot of knowledge to share. Give yourself some credit. Justin, thank you so much for coming on. And
Thanks
a
for
blast. Check out the show notes for links to hang out with Justin on LinkedIn. Find him, follow him, do all that stuff. Make him feel incredibly important with all the extra likes and follows and things like that.
Aw.
Justin, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.